Now, you might be wondering, ultimately, like, Leo, why are you harping on these double standards? Why is it so important? And here's why. It's actually very important. It's more important than almost anybody realizes. Here's why. Because God, love, and truth is lack of bias. So my mission here is to guide you towards the highest realizations of God, love, and truth. That's what I teach. I can't do that if you develop a habit of hypocrisy and holding and arguing with these kind of gross double standards that most people hold and being as biased as you are. This issue of hypocrisy is much deeper than most people realize. Here's what I want you to understand. Take this away from this episode, that you are literally too biased to realize God and to understand what reality is at the deepest levels. If you want to really understand God, the obstacle to that is all of your biases and your double standards. Your mind is so corrupted by bias and double standards that you actually don't have a clear enough perception to be able to cognize God. Because God is the total absence of bias. In order to see God clearly, you have to cleanse your mind of all your biases. And so that's ultimately what the point of this whole episode is. It's actually much more significant than you would think. This episode, you might have thought that, oh, this is about Leo criticizing conservatives or Leo, talking about some problems within society. No, this was not. I'm not talking about problems about society. I don't care about who has easier sex or who's more oppressed, black people or trans. I don't give a fuck about that. It doesn't matter. That's all bullshit. I mean, it does matter. Of course, I do care about that on a certain, human relative level. It matters. But in the larger context of what we're doing here, it doesn't matter at all. What we really care about is purifying your mind of your own biases so that you can access the deepest wisdom and the highest insights. That's what we care about. That's why I talk about bias so much. Go see my episodes. See my episode called Understanding Bias. See my episode called Self-Bias. See my other episode called Understanding Relativism, Part 1. I'm going to have a Part 2 and a Part 3 coming up in the future. Very important episodes. It's this which is preventing you from accessing God, not just you, but the majority of mankind. 99% of mankind is so biased they will never understand God. And this includes scientists and academics and progressives. You're not appreciating how problematic bias is. This is not a small thing. This bias problem it goes to the very metaphysics of reality. Low conscience people have blatant double standards. Now you understand this. And you're starting to get a little sense of why that is. Because selfishness is bias. And God is selflessness. So if you want to access God, you have to become selfless, which means you have to give up all your biases. And this is why nobody accesses God very frequently, because they don't want to give up all their biases. They're too attached to them. The fundamental problem is that people don't care about truth. They don't see what they're missing by giving up truth. They sacrifice truth as soon as it's intellectually convenient for their survival. For example, the Bible says it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. But that's a very inconvenient truth. Therefore, what most Christians do is they pursue wealth. And they cherry pick the Bible for, those moral prescriptions which are convenient for them. And then the ones that are not convenient, they ignore those. For example, Jordan Peterson, he knows that the Bible says it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And yet, he's raking in millions of dollars doing what he's doing. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that Jordan Peterson is doing what he's doing simply for the money. But still, like, if I was talking to Jordan Peterson, I would really press him on this. I would say, you speak about the Bible a lot. You talk about all sorts of Bible stories and various kinds of prescriptions, moral prescriptions from the Bible and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. But what about this one from the Bible? If you truly believe in the Bible and you think it's so important, you think it's the cornerstone of all of Western civilization, how can you ignore this most crucial passage that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven? So I would ask him, you're a rich man, you have millions of dollars. So are you going to get into heaven? How come, and then I would ask him, how come when you're talking against Marxism and communism and socialism and progressivism and all this sorts of stuff, how come, and you quote the Bible a lot as you do that, and you talk about Bible stories, how come you never bring up this problem with capitalism? Shouldn't you really be troubled by capitalism? Because capitalism encourages people to become wealthier and wealthier. Doesn't that mean that they're not going to be getting into heaven? And isn't the whole point of what you're teaching to help people get into heaven? How do you square that? Isn't that a double standard that you hold? See? You might think that this is just some sort of debate point or some sort of minor quibble, but it's not a minor quibble. Literally what I'm saying is that Jordan Peterson is unable to realize God because of the double standards he holds in his mind. That's how serious this is. And most likely he will die not realizing God, himself as God, because of the double standards he holds and the money he earns for holding those double standards.